If you just want to get paid, this is not the place for you. That's Coach Brian Kelly talking about what has happened at LSU in the spring transfer portal. Kelly was speaking with Jacques Doucet of WAFB-TV. I'll play the clip for you in a moment. But the bottom line is that LSU needs help in the worst kind of way at defensive tackle, and NIL is exerting pressures never before experienced. They got beat. But Kelly's not panicking, at least not on the surface. Here he is speaking with Doucet.
Well, I think I made it pretty clear in a number of the press conferences that I had that we were in the market in recruiting in the transfer portal looking for defensive linemen. It hasn't fared very well, quite frankly, because we're selling something a little bit differently, and that is we want to recruit. We want to engage, build relationships. We want to develop, retain, and have success. We're not in the market of buying players, and unfortunately, right now, that's what some guys are looking for. They want to be bought. And look, I understand NIL is part of this, and we have an incredible collective. We have very, very generous opportunities around the greater Baton Rouge area for NIL opportunities. So they are here, but we're not going to go out and buy players. That's not what this is about. This was never about that. We will develop you. We will get you ready for the next step, as we did with Jaden Daniels, as we did with Malik Neighbors, as we did with Brian Thomas. We developed 3 defensive linemen that all got drafted this year, and we'll do that again. But if you're just looking to get paid, you're looking in the wrong place. If you like all the things that we do here in developing our players, bringing you into a championship program, playing in front of the best fan base in America, playing for championships, and having an opportunity for NIL, you should be a Tiger. But if you just want to get paid, this is not the place for you.
Kelly makes a lot of sense. Player development is important, certainly in the long run. Let's see what Jeff Palermo, the news and sports director of the Louisiana Radio Network, and Tiger Rag editor Todd Horne have to say.
Talking with Tiger Rag editor Todd Horne. So LSU football coach Brian Kelly says in an interview with a Baton Rouge TV station, LSU is not in the business of buying players when talking about missing out on a couple of defensive tackle missing out on a couple of defensive tackles who were in the transfer portal and have decided to go to other schools. What do you make out of Coach Brian Kelly's comments, Todd?
Well, I think he's being authentic. He's being genuine. LSU does have a lot to promote. They do develop their players. His emphasis is developing the players. You've got Jaden Daniels and his development, winning the Heisman. You've got 3 first-round NFL picks. LSU has a lot to sell. But as you and I talked with Matt Moscona last night on Tiger Rag Radio, there is a clear indication that LSU is extremely sensitive and aware of the collective, the need for a stronger collective, and they've increased their budget. He just got beat with these 2 defensive tackles, and I think a lot of it right now is explaining that he does not like this. He does not want to buy players. He's going to be an advocate for some type of regulation for NIL. And that's the biggest problem right now. There is no regulation. And what happened here is the defensive tackle market just skyrocketed this spring.
It certainly did. And really, I mean, you could tell a player, Todd, that, hey, we can develop you. We can send you off to the NFL. But a lot of these guys, especially in the transfer portal, they're looking, they got their hand out, don't they?
Hey, Dominic Williams was one of the top defensive tackles, certainly in the TCU's conference. I don't even remember what conference they're in right now. I get
12.
so confused. Right, Big 12. But he's got 2 years of eligibility left. If he was interested in tradition and the tradition of college football, the tradition of playing with one school, he wouldn't be in a transfer portal to begin with. He's in there to get as much as he can get. And he demanded 7 figures. The most that a defensive tackle had ever gotten from NIL or from a collective prior to this year, from what we understand, was close to $300,000. So you're demanding 7 figures. He got 7 figures from Oklahoma reportedly. So it more than tripled in terms of its market. I don't think Brian Kelly and LSU anticipated that. They were in a better position, but I don't think they anticipated that. And now is a little bit of excuse making.
what do you say as far as some of the fans that are saying, hey, BK is making some excuses here?
I think BK is a politician. I think he's a smart man. I think he's got a handle on what's going on, and I think he knows that this isn't going to last. It's not going to stay this way, and he's working for the longer term in a it's slightly different way than he's saying, but I think he's being smart with what he's saying right now. I think he is putting development and tradition and longer term results in play, but it's not going to help LSU's defensive line come the fall.
This past Tuesday, Jeff and Todd sat down with Matt Moscona, host of After Further Review, to discuss the situation and get into some hard numbers. I'm your host, Jake McMains, and we'll be back right after this.
It's your time to move things forward. U.S. Army Reserve.
Tiger Rag Radio. The details do matter. Every step, every hand on the ground, every route, everything that we do has a purpose. We are really focused, and our attention to detail is going to be unmatched.
We're back on Tiger Rag Radio. Jeff Palermo, News and Sports Director of the Louisiana Radio Network, along with the editor for Tiger Rag Magazine. That is Todd Horne. Joining us now, the host of After Further Review. Always enjoy having him on our show. Matt Moscona joins us from ESPN 104.5 and 104.9. How you doing tonight, Matt?
Fellas, I'm doing well. Thanks for the invite.
Well, it's always great to have you on. Let's talk a little NIL and the transfer portal and so forth. So far, LSU football is struggling to reel in that big-name player. I've listened to your show. I've listened to your podcast quite a few times, man, and you've talked about it, and you got a good finger on the pulse here of what's going on. LSU thought they were in a better position when it comes to their collective offering NIL deals, but apparently it's still just not good enough. Is that pretty much what it's coming down to here, Matt?
Well, it's a little bizarre, the paradigm shift. LSU really struggled to get organized with their collective initially, and in the last, certainly 6 to 8 months, Bayou Traditions, as they were the Go Enterprises that ceased, they launched Bayou Traditions, and they've really started to get organized and do a better job of fundraising. I've said this on the record, LSU's roster a year ago cost them about $4 million, the collective. By comparison, the Texas roster that went to the college football playoff, that was a $9 million roster from the Texas collective. So LSU's goal this year was to push their number to 6. They actually pushed north of 7. So they've really increased fundraising. The problem is they've gone and offered very healthy NIL deals to players to both return to LSU. The number I was told was they offered $500,000 each. The collective did to Brian Thomas, Mason Smith, Mekhi Wingo. All three obviously went pro. And then in the portal, they made very strong offers. The collective did to both Dominic Williams and Simeon Barrow from TCU and Michigan State, respectively, and both ended up at other places. So it's a strange paradigm shift, Jeff, because LSU's probably sitting on a couple of $1 million that they'd earmarked to spend on this roster that they haven't been able to get players to accept.
Did they just, in the last part of what you said, did they just underestimate the value of those defensive tackles in a market that just went out of control as far as the value for a defensive tackle, or were they in the ballpark with those offers to those guys and something else just tilted it? Do you know?
So I think it's a good question, and I think a couple things. First of all, elite defensive tackles are hard to come by in high school recruiting. So when an elite defensive tackle jumps in the portal, it's going to be even more competitive. That's one thing to keep in mind. So the number that I was told with Dominic Williams from TCU was that he wanted a 7-figure NIL deal. And LSU did not offer that. I can tell you the number that I was told they did offer was very competitive. And so when they missed on Williams, they turned their attention to Barrow from Michigan State and actually offered Barrow more than they had offered Williams because they were in, a bit of a desperate space. My understanding, though, is that they got into a battle with Jason Taylor, who is, Mason Taylor's dad, who's on staff at Miami, who's a Pro Football Hall of Famer and helps out with the defensive line there on Mario Cristobal's staff. And, I think maybe some of LSU's past NIL issues, not necessarily having the deepest pockets, were something that Jason Taylor probably used against LSU in this recruiting battle for Simeon Barrow, and ultimately Miami won out. So I think what we're all learning throughout this is that there are so many layers to recruitment, which has always been the case. It's just a lot more of them now are above board that we all see, when a lot of this had just been whispered about for years.
Well, I have two questions for you. One, Miami supposedly has a billionaire sugar daddy, I can't think of his name, that is backing all of their NIL efforts. So was it a case where Taylor turned the narrative against LSU and at the same time tapped into some of that money to push it over the top with Barrier? Or that's the first question.
Well, the booster you're talking about is John Ruiz.
Right.
He founded LifeLock. To be very clear, I do not know what Miami's NIL offer, what their collective offered Simeon Barrow. I do not know that number. I just know the LSU standpoint of it. But I get the sense that it's one of those things where maybe the fact that LSU is making I said LifeLock, Life Wallet, my apologies.
Yeah.
I think maybe the offers that LSU is making might be hard to believe for someone like Jason Taylor, whose son 2 years ago went through the recruiting process with LSU and has continued to be a productive LSU player. And I don't know. I mean, maybe suffice to say that he thought maybe his son might deserve a better offer. I don't know, something along those lines.
I hear you.
I think recruiting can be messy. Coaches negative recruit. I think it's one of those things where a year ago LSU missed on 3 players that picked Florida State. Keon Coleman, Braden Fisk, Ventrell Cypress, 3 players that LSU wanted, and Florida State flat out bid LSU.
Mm-hmm.
This is a year where LSU actually could be more competitive financially, and other factors seem to have cost them.
I think that most people that contact the 90-Day Lifeline are looking to be heard and to feel seen.
Anybody that calls here to talk about anything that has them upset, we will talk to them.
Even on our chat and text services, you will be actually chatting and texting with a real person.
We have enough resources to be able to help people in any type of situation.
We have helpline specialists that are trained to handle the variety of calls that we get.
It's a very laid-back thing. We're not judging anybody. We're just a listening ear that some people don't have.
How does an LSU stay competitive year in and year out moving forward in this NIL? How do you keep tapping into that money when we don't have a Jerry Jones, we don't have a Walmart like Arkansas, or we don't have a John Ruiz like Miami? How do they stay competitive? And then with this court case, the House versus the NCAA about to be settled apparently, and that's going to pull the collective in-house so it becomes a revenue share. How's that going to impact everything? Can you answer all these questions?
Yeah. No,
Show ends at 8 o'clock, Matt.
No, I have. You tell me when you got to hit a break, but I do feel like I have a really good finger on the pulse of all this stuff.
Okay, go ahead.
So the first part of that is LSU's collective. LSU has 3 individuals that are donating to the collective at a 7-figure level, 3. But there's about 24 that are funding the collective in total. For LSU to remain competitive, they've got to engage the $50,000 to $100,000 donor and the average fan. This is one thing both Ole Miss and Auburn have done exceptionally well. The $20 a month, $50 a month donor that's on auto draft, they're in the 6 to 7 to 10 to 13,000 fans donating that monthly, which allows you to keep and maintain, your base donation. LSU hasn't tapped into that yet. That's number one. The other thing too is it's tough. LSU had a really expensive couple of years. You had to pay $17 million for Ed Ogeron to go away. You had to commit $100 million to Brian Kelly. You paid Kim Mulkey. Then she won a national championship. You had to pay her more. Jay Johnson won a national championship. You had to pay him more. And so when you keep shaking the same trees, and then you have to go back to these same people and say, now we need you to pay the players, it gets challenging.
Well,
but I do think
and Matt,
the
sorry
opportunity to win is what pays off. Yeah.
Is you just want they're paying $12 million more dollars for their defense this year than they did last year when you account for all the buyouts on both sides of that defensive shift. So that's not chump change either. Sorry to interrupt you, but I thought that was relevant to that part of the discussion.
Yeah. So so LSU will have to continue to do a good job fundraising, and the really challenging part is that when you have really 24 people that are funding your collective, if one person decides they're not going to give, well, that really hampers your efforts. So they're doing a much better job, but they still, I would say, have a ways to go still. As far as the collectives coming in-house, if and when that does happen, I don't know how much changes dramatically. I think the revenue share, if we ever do actually see that, will dramatically change things. And I'll tell you, I've had conversations firsthand with athletic administrators that have told me for at least a year they've already been preparing budgetary-wise for the inevitability of a revenue share with student athletes. The most fascinating thing that would happen there is every athletic department has a budget, and every dollar of the budget is already allocated because so few athletic departments, like a handful, actually turn a profit because all of the money is allocated.
Right.
So now if you're going to take a chunk of that and pay student athletes, you have to cut somewhere else in your budget. And my opinion, what is ultimately going to happen is you're going to end up cutting sports. And because of Title IX, it's going to be men's sports. So you're going to look at non-revenue men's sports, in my opinion, just to be clear, it's my opinion, that end up getting just wiped out as a result of this impending revenue share.
Good answers, Matt. We do now have to hit a break. We appreciate it, man. That's good information as always. I encourage everybody to listen to ESPN 104.5 and 104.9 as always from 3 to 6 o'clock Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for your time, man. We appreciate it.
Okay, guys. See you.
May is here, and with it comes adventure from your friends at the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. Enjoy your summer with the 2024 Summer Reading Program. Besides reading fun, check out free programs for all ages at your library. Go to ebrpl.com/summerreading. That's ebrpl.com/summerreading. Your EBR Parish Library is where summer fun begins.
That's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Matt, Jeff, and Todd for their discussion. I've been your host, Jake McMains, and be sure to check in with TigerRag.com for all of your current LSU sports.